And my name is John Mahalchak. I'm volunteering as an Oley ambassador and newly put on the board of trustees. I'm just excited to be able to kind of share my journey with you guys today. So that's the first thing we'll do. And then I'm going to go over a few tips and tricks I've learned along the way, my 10 plus years dealing with chronic illness. I'm going to spend a couple moments on just how patients can kind of get involved with what's going on right now. And then I have a charge for everybody here at the end. So who am I? Before I got sick, I graduated from Allegheny College with a degree in psychology and neuroscience. And then I worked for an autism research project for a couple of years until I got really sick. After that, I was forced to go on disability. And I'll kind of explain that part of the journey here in a second. And then I've been, volunteering my time with patient advocacy ever since, as we mentioned there. And then finally, I do have a passion that I've developed here for helping other patients with chronic illness learn to thrive. So that's me. Looks a little bit different, but I'm going to use this diagram here to kind of help tell my story. So I first became sick in college. I was having severe bouts of abdominal pain and nausea, vomiting. Wasn't really sure what was going on and ended up down at the hospital, and they took my gallbladder out because it was inflamed, thinking, okay, this is a one and done and we'll be good to go. After that, my health kind of continued to deteriorate. I became having these episodes of acute pancreatitis for unknown causes. I had to have multiple procedures done to try to fix it. But over the course of 3 to 4 years, my pancreas had atrophied down to only about 30% of its original size. So because of that, we placed a GJ tube to see if I could get some more nutrients, because I was having issues with that as well from the pancreatitis. But we also decided to kind of do something radical and do a total pancreatectomy with auto-islet transplant. So when they do that, they take my pancreas out, they took out my appendix and my spleen as well. And then they place the insulin producing cells from my pancreas into my liver. Excuse me. So that I don't become diabetic, right? Because your pancreas handles diabetes, sugar, insulin regulation as well. So we did all of this, and I thought, okay, maybe now I'm home free. And I did okay for a little bit. I actually am completely off insulin, which does not happen very often following this surgery, but I still wasn't able to tolerate oral intake. My body wasn't absorbing what I was eating. So the GJ tube stayed in place, just to continue to provide me with calories. And every once in a while, I'd have to go on TPN as well. Excuse me again. So I was having this issue where the extension of the J kept flipping back into my stomach. Sometimes as often as every couple of weeks, I would be doing my feeds, and all of a sudden, because of my gastroparesis, the feeds would just fill up into my stomach, and then I ended up vomiting them up. And then we'd realize that the tube had flipped. So with this procedure I had done, my anatomy is also pretty complex. So interventional radiology would have a really hard time sometimes getting that tube to flip back into the right location. So we did all of that. IR at one point finally said, you know what, we can't do this anymore. It's not safe for us to continue to manipulate. So because of that, I ended up having to get an EGD done every time my tube flipped, which wasn't really sustainable. So we decided to do another surgery. And to help with what was going on, we also removed the sphincter at the bottom of my stomach to help me with emptying. And then they redid the attachments in my small intestine from my original surgery. And then at the same time, we switched tubes. So we took the GJ tube out, and now I have a standalone G, which I actually just converted down to a Mickey button about 6 months ago. And I have a standalone J, which is a normal dangler. They don't do low profile for those yet, I believe. And it has been an absolute game changer. And I'll kind of talk more about that here in a second. As I said, we had that traditional tube for almost 10 years, flipped all the time. And we were having issues trying to get it in the right spot. So we talked to my healthcare provider, like, how can we prevent this flipping from happening? These EGDs are not a good idea to continue to do every couple months. So that's when we did the surgery, and we split to the standalone J. So that was about a year ago. And I'm happy to say that I no longer have any issues with feeds backing up into my stomach. And until recently, I was able to tolerate my tube feeds really without any issue. Excuse me. The best part about this one, though, is that the replacements can be done very quickly by interventional radiology. So the piece that is actually inside of my intestine, it's only about like 5 to 6 centimeters from the tip to where the bolster is on the outside of my body. So they can very easily get it in and out. And like I said, that's been amazing because I no longer have to go under anesthesia every time I need a new feeding tube, because these ones are, like I said, done in IR. They don't even use any sedation. So it's a lot better. And like, as I said, I'm tolerating everything much, much better than I was before. So like I said, I wanted to also go over a couple of things that I've learned along the way through my journey. And the first one is the one that hits home to me the most, right? And that's that you can't have good physical health without good mental health. That was really hard for me to say a couple of years ago. You probably never would have heard me say that. I for whatever reason, had kind of a bad vibe about mental health. And then I started going through some major issues, and I was able to meet with a therapist, and it was game changing. As she says all the time, and I always tease her when I say this, but she always told me that, if she met somebody that had my kind of chronic conditions, who wasn't a little bit depressed, she would be more worried about me than she is, with me having some depression. Excuse me. And that took a lot. So I always like to remind folks that there's, you have to take care of your mental health when you're dealing with your chronic illness as well, whether that be a therapist, whether that be a psychiatrist, but it's really important to kind of keep your mental health in good shape as well. The other thing is support groups are amazing, and they're amazing for 2 reasons. And Oley runs a fabulous one as well. Initially, they're great because as someone who's new to the group, you're still learning quite a bit, and you're going to receive lots of good advice from folks in the group. But, by helping to facilitate a couple support groups, I've also realized that it's almost as important for the folks who have been in the group for a long time, right? Because you get to see this progression where you have somebody come into the group who is scared, not sure what's going on. And then, fast forward a little bit, and now they're the ones providing help and hope to the new people in the group. And it's amazing to see the transformation of these folks who are in the support groups I work with. So if you haven't already considered a support group, I would highly recommend them. You can get disease-specific ones. Oley also offers one that's very well done. So they're amazing, just to help you kind of cope. Excuse me. The last part is to take good notes. And what do I mean by that? So at least for me, I'm seeing providers almost once a month, if not a little bit more. It's really hard to keep track of everything. So what I actually did is I have a note sheet that I take with me, and it lets me kind of plan the visit first. So I'll list, what do I want to talk to the doctor about today? And then I'll have a spot for, what did we talk about? What are we changing? What do I need to do after this visit to make sure everything's okay? And if it wasn't for that, I just wouldn't remember. So that format might not work for everybody, but basically it's just good to have kind of a list of questions going in that you want to talk about, because it can be an intimidating situation sometimes. You're in there with the doctor, you only have 10 minutes and then you forget something. So I always highly recommend that people kind of think about what they're going to want to talk about for a couple minutes just before they go. The other part to this that I wanted to mention is, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this before, is this movement called open notes, where, excuse me, where hospitals are now releasing physician progress notes into their patient portals. So you can actually go into your patient portal and see what your doctor put about the visit. It's great to then compare that back with your notes, just so you kind of remember what's going on. And those can also help when you're planning for your next visit. So if your hospital hasn't signed on to Open Notes yet, I believe it's required by law by now, but everyone's implementing it a little bit differently. So like I said, the last thing I want to talk about was how to get involved. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how do you get involved in patient advocacy? And as I said in that corporate sponsor video a little bit ago, I didn't even know what patient advocacy was until I met Oley. I didn't even know it existed. If you would have told me that something like that existed, I wouldn't have known. But I think it's, I always tell people that it's important to keep the patient voice in healthcare front and center. But by saying that, that means we as patients also have an obligation to, when we're able, share that voice. So that's why I'm so passionate about working in the advocacy community. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a lot, right? But here's just a couple ideas that I've put down, but, you know, there's so much more you can do as you get involved. The first is a good plug for Oley ambassadors. We're a fun group, and we get to work with folks who are new to therapy or been on therapy for a while but still have questions. And then if, you know, that's too much of a commitment, Oley's always looking for volunteers for other things as well. I'm sure if you called and asked, we would definitely find something to get you to help with. So that's my plug for Oley. I also mentioned how much I love and think highly of support groups. So that could be another way you can get involved, is find a local support group and then volunteer to help with that as well. If legislation is more your thing, you can write letters to lawmakers about issues that are important to you in the GI community. There's a group that Oley is a member of called the Digestive Disease National Coalition, and they work every year. They have a public policy forum in DC where you can go meet with lawmakers, but that hasn't happened since COVID. It's all went virtual. So if that's something that you'd like to do, you can go to their website. They have information about just the different issues that they're working on, with information on how you can write letters to your lawmakers. Cool. And then the last one is kind of new, and there's some people who haven't heard of these before, but hospitals sometimes have things called patient and family advisory councils. So my academic medical center does have one. And basically we are a group of patients and family members from that were treated at the hospital. And we get together every month, every other month, to review different things that are happening at the hospital. We'll look at new literature that's coming out, like pamphlets, things like that. If there's new processes that they're looking at implementing, things like that, they'll come to us as the patient and families to see what we think, see if there's anything we need to tweak along the way. So those are another great opportunity to start. If you go to the website for your health hospital that you go to, I'm sure somewhere, usually near the bottom, there's a link about getting involved, and then they'll have all the contact information there. So that's another good way to get involved in the area. And last but not least, because I think I've been over on time, I just have one charge I want to give to everybody here. So next time you go to your doctor's office, and would you tell your doctor why Oley is important to you, and then ask if you can leave information about Oley for other patients. So if you can all do that, help us spread the word. You know, we can continue to help folks dealing with tube feeds and TPN. So thank you so much.